Two of the most prosperous, most connected neighbors in Southeast Asia have been trying to build a single train line for over a generation. They have the engineers, they have the capital. What they do not have is a way to share control. Not an engineering problem, not a shortage of capital. What you are looking at across that narrow strip of water is a deadlock of political trust. Just before 4 in the morning, Nurul steps out of her home into the dense, humid air of Johor Bahru. She joins 300,000 daily commuters shuffling toward the checkpoint. Singapore's nominal gross domestic product per capita, 107,000 US dollars. Malaysia's 15,000. A 7-to-1 gap. It pulls human capital across that border like a tractor beam. Yet the physical connection between these two neighbors is still mid-20th century infrastructure. The dream of a 90-minute high-speed rail connection between Kuala Lumpur and Singapore has been alive for over a generation. In February 2025, Malaysia moved the project from the request for information stage to the request for proposal stage, a signal that something was moving again. But look closer. Malaysian Transport Minister Anthony Loke said in February 2026 that it remains premature to talk about it with Singapore. No funding process concluded. No formal proposal raised with the Singapore government. Local progress like the Bukit Chaga Rail Transit System link is on track for a late 2026 launch, but the Grand Trunk Line, down the spine of the Malay Peninsula, stalled. Trade integration can be written into a treaty. Pooling regulatory sovereignty is an entirely different matter. Act 2. The Foundation. To understand why a 350-kilometer train line is so difficult to build, you have to go back to how the deal broke. Formally agreed in 2013 and signed as a binding bilateral treaty in 2016, the high-speed rail was designed to connect Kuala Lumpur's urban core to Singapore's Jurong East district in 90 minutes. It was supposed to be the crown jewel of peninsular connectivity. Instead, it became a mirror for everything that separates these two neighbors. Malaysia requested repeated delays. It paid Singapore a total of 15 million Singapore dollars in suspension penalties between 2018 and 2020. Then in January 2021, the structural foundation cracked beyond repair. The breaking point was not the alignment of the tracks. It was not the location of the stations. It was a jointly controlled entity called the Assets Company. Singapore saw this independent operator as essential, a neutral safeguard for procurement across a sensitive international boundary. Malaysia wanted it removed. It wanted direct oversight over its own portion of the infrastructure. Neither side yielded. The project collapsed, and Malaysia paid 102.8 million Singapore dollars, over 320 million Malaysian ringgit in final termination compensation in March 2021. That 9-figure write-off was the price of administrative incompatibility. Act 3. The money question. But here is where it gets more complicated. When governments step back from cross-border infrastructure, private capital has to carry the weight. Malaysia's cabinet has issued a strict mandate. Any revival must be 100% private sector-led, zero sovereign debt guarantees. The state will not touch the national debt to gross domestic product ratio to make this happen. That changes the commercial mathematics entirely. The shortlisted names include YTL Corporation, Berjaya Land, and China Railway Construction Corporation. A lineup that signals both the scale of capital required and the geopolitical overtones that will shadow any final selection. Compare that to the 5.9 billion US dollar China-Laos Railway. That project moved from blueprint to operational line because it carried state guarantees and sovereign strategic weight. Without that shield, private developers on the Malay Peninsula look down the tracks and see a brutal headwind. Malaysia set a self-imposed decision deadline for the fourth quarter of 2024. It passed without a cabinet decision. That missed deadline is not administrative delay. It is a concrete signal that even within Malaysia's own government, the question of who bears the financial risk remains unresolved. And the commercial pressure is severe. The Kuala Lumpur to Singapore air route registered 5.6 million scheduled seats in 2025, making it the third busiest cross-border air corridor on Earth. 7 commercial airlines compete for those passengers, pushing the average economy ticket down to 62 US dollars. For a private rail operator carrying massive construction debt and zero state backing, matching that 62 US dollar ceiling while achieving commercial viability is close to an impossible equation. Act 4. The consequence chain. The stalled project does not just sit there, it generates costs. Johor has had to advance its own 10 billion ringgit elevated autonomous rapid transit network, roughly 2 billion US dollars, simply to manage urban congestion that a functioning trunk line would have relieved. That is a municipal workaround paid for because the primary corridor does not exist. Intermediate cities along the peninsula, Seremban, Malacca, Muar, remain economically stranded from the high-value growth of the terminal hubs. They are missing out on the 20 to 40% real estate appreciation that typically clusters around East Asian high-speed rail stations. This is the kind of uplift that transformed Guangzhou South from agricultural land into a commercial district within a decade of the Pearl River Delta network opening. The human cost runs deeper. Malaysia has seen 1.8 million highly skilled immigrants leave the country. Without a rapid transit link, a professional born in Seremban faces a binary choice. 4 hours every day fighting causeway traffic, or relocate permanently, taking their talent and their tax revenue across the strait. There is no middle option. Act 5. The deeper implication. The stalled tracks reveal something fundamental about how the Association of Southeast Asian Nations works and where it reaches its limits. The ASEAN Way has long prioritized absolute national sovereignty and non-interference. That posture has been highly effective for keeping the peace and signing trade frameworks. But it struggles to support the deep supranational governance structures that physical border integration actually requires. Unlike Indonesia's state-backed Wush high-speed rail, which has carried over 12.2 million cumulative passengers by relying on a sovereign mandate and state-owned enterprises, a private-led cross-border project cannot survive on goodwill alone. It requires a shared surrender of regulatory control, and neither neighbor is currently willing to make that surrender. If two of the most prosperous, modern, and interdependent neighbors in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations cannot find an institutional compromise to share a train line, the grand vision of a seamless regional transport network remains a distant ambition. For now, the steel rails stop short of the water. And Nurul and 300,000 commuters like her continue their pre-dawn wait at the border, wondering whether the distance between two nations can ever truly be measured in minutes instead of decades. I am Hero the Hornbill, and this is the ASEAN Angle. If this episode gave you a new way of seeing the region, subscribe so you do not miss the next one. New episodes weekly, link in the description. Mark, you said I have this slide before the Nurul one.